What is an impeachment inquiry? What is Nancy Pelosi asking for here?
Well, the impeachment inquiry will be the beginning of a process to see if there is enough evidence or enough rationale to begin a formal impeachment process. So essentially doing an investigation that would help uncover acts or evidence that might lead them to write impeachment articles, which would then begin the formal process.
Or it may not.
Or it may not. They may learn that there's exculpatory evidence or that there's just not enough political or public opinion appetite for this, and they may choose not to do it. But this is the first step in kind of learning about whether they want to do it or not.
And how serious is this a matter? How serious an announcement was it we heard just a little while ago with Nancy Pelosi?
I think it's a fairly serious announcement because she'd been resisting calls from a minority within her party, but it seems like she's responding to a recent movement from many members of the Democratic Party in Congress to start this. And to some degree, it reflects a broader sentiment among liberals and progressives in this country to begin this process. It's a major scandal, and it's going to be a major distraction for both policymaking in Congress and for President Trump's attention.
Realistically speaking, though, given the dynamics in the Senate, is it realistic that we will ever see an impeachment hearing?
It's possible. I'm not sure I would be comfortable predicting it at this point. We know that there's a high unlikelihood that he would ever be removed by the Senate. So it just remains as to whether the act of impeachment itself would be enough of a sanction that the House would want to go through with it. Certainly historians would see that as a major black mark on a presidency to have been impeached, but I think that everyone's correctly thinking that removal is probably not going to happen, at least through the impeachment process.
And what is the president accused of doing, and how does this run afoul of the Constitution?
Well, he's accused of using his official capacity as president to conduct foreign policy for his own political benefit, not necessarily for the good of the country. And so that is not necessarily illegal, but it's considered a misuse of the office and perhaps a violation of his oath of office. So that is the general theory under which they're undertaking this investigation.
And is it the more serious allegation that he's instructed his director of national intelligence to not cooperate with this investigation?
That will be a contributing factor to this. There are a number of particular aspects, both regard to the Ukraine scenario as well as other actions that he's taken as president that will no doubt find their way into this investigation. But the more proximate activity was the mere act of contacting a foreign leader and asking for not necessarily the best policy or foreign policy toward the United States, but for something for personal political gain. That is kind of the root at this stage for the Democrats in Congress.
And typically, how quickly do these types of inquiries move?
They do not move quickly unless there is something just major scandal or a strong swell of public opinion. Generally speaking, it takes time to schedule witnesses. It takes time to comb through documents. And that is even if the White House and the administration does not stonewall. And if they do, this could have to work its way through the courts before there are rulings on document production and witness testimony. So this could take a while.
So we will have several concurrent investigations going on through different committees over on the House side. What about the Senate side?
The Senate doesn't play an official role at this point. In fact, they won't play any role legally until the House actually votes on articles of impeachment to send it over. I'm sure, no doubt, that many senators will be asked to opine on this. Many senators are running for president. They will be asked on their opinion. So this will become part of the Senate dialogue, but it won't be part of the formal Senate proceedings unless the House votes on impeachment.
But several House committees will be investigating it at this point.
Yes, several House committees, and remember, those include some rights for the minority party, so Republicans sitting on those committees will also get opportunities to examine documents, call witnesses, and make their case if they want to go on the record as defending President Trump's behavior in this.
Is it possible that this impeachment inquiry is going to become a distraction during the upcoming presidential race?
It's almost certainly going to become something that dominates the presidential campaign. Not only will the candidates for the Democratic nomination be asked to comment on this, but of course this will dominate the back and forth between Democrats and President Trump. This will make the campaign even less about issues than it might have already been, and clearly on Donald Trump against his opponents, and it will be fought out in the courts, fought out in Congress, and fought out on social media.
There are those that say that this could be a trap for the Democrats.
Many were urging caution. Many Democrats were urging caution on this because they feel that President Trump is at his best when he is attacking an opponent, when he has something to go up against, and that Democrats should have focused on the issues rather than focusing on investigating the president. At this point, this seems to have not been the argument that's won the day. They're going to go with the investigations, and we'll see how the public reacts to that.
But it's risky for the Democrats, isn't it?
It is risky. Unless they were sure to have the votes to impeach and convict in the Senate, which we know they don't. If it was more of a sure thing, then it would have been a sure thing. But now that they know that they don't have necessarily the votes to convict and remove from office, it is a risky gamble to see whether they're going to advance impeachment or just kind of wait for the November 2020 election to remove him from office.
And so what are we going to see happen first here?
Well, the first thing will be obviously a war of words to kind of set the terms of the debate. Part of this is about the formal proceeding in Congress. This is also going to get played out in the media and then later in social media and public opinion to see whether the public actually has an appetite for this and registers that through public opinion surveys, whether they want to support this investigation going forward or if they show strong disapproval, that might make the Democrats call this off.
What changed here? As you have mentioned a couple times, the Democrats were not looking to go down this road initially. What happened to convince the Speaker and others to go ahead and open this inquiry? Was it the secret, or not the secret, the behind-the-scenes meeting that the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, House Senate Relations Committee had, or what changed?
I think what's changed, part of it was just the nature of the interaction between President Trump and the new president of the Ukraine. So part of it was in the nature of the alleged activity. But I think part of it was also the fact that many Democrats, including Democrats that are coming from competitive districts that they just picked up in 2018, are starting to feel their own desire to pursue impeachment. Speaker Pelosi was trying to protect a lot of these vulnerable Democrats going into the next election. Now that they're on board and a stronger portion of her caucus is on board, she might feel free to actually go ahead and pursue this more fully.
But again, that gets back to the risk that we were talking about, that you have many of these Democrats who have won in traditional Republican districts that swung the House during the midterm elections. They are vulnerable now for the Republicans, and the House could swing back over to the Republicans by a small majority here.
Yeah, the margins are not great for the Democrats in the House. This is just a kind of a calculation on the part of these vulnerable Democrats that they will actually at least maintain, if not pick up support, by people who will see the investigation as justified in their districts and want to at least investigate, if not punish, the president for his behavior, compared to the increased enthusiasm that might come from Republicans in their districts that want to come out, volunteer, donate, and ultimately vote against those vulnerable Democrats. So we'll have to see how each individual member gauges their own public opinion in their district in terms of the favorability of this action.
And let me ask a Louisiana-specific question. How will this play in Louisiana, where you have one Republican candidate that is really hitching his wagon to the president here, and one that is sort of also talking about voting with Trump?
I think it's going to be very interesting how this impacts the gubernatorial race. This is really not a state-level concern, although we've seen the nationalization of politics creeping down into state and local politics for a while now. So I suspect all the gubernatorial candidates will have to sound off on their opinion on this matter. And clearly Eddie Rispone will talk about this. He wants to consider himself a very strong Trump supporter. And will that endear him to conservative voters in this state? This might be something that helps raise his profile and energizes his potential voters. I think one of the things that'll be interesting, and this isn't fascinating unless you're really kind of deep into this, but to what degree will there be multiple committees attacking this question on multiple fronts, or will they consolidate efforts? Will they create a select committee that kind of focuses all their investigative firepower into one unit? It's harder for the administration if they're basically trying to train their attention on a lot of different, investigations, on a lot of different inquisitors. And so if the Democrats keep it spread out, and over here we're talking about intelligence, and over here we're talking about the Judiciary Committee, and then there are a few other committees looking into this behavior, this could really tie up a lot of administration hands, even if they're doing nothing more than answering requests and denying requests for testimony and documents. It's still going to occupy a lot of their time. So the day-to-day business of governing will get tougher in the White House.
Now, I guess my last question, and if you don't feel comfortable answering this or positing an answer on this, why do you think Ukraine?
I think this is probably something that, part of this relates to this idea that it's It's a newly independent state. I mean, newly. From the 1990s, it broke away from the Soviet Union, so it's been trending westward. It's been looking toward NATO. Russia still wants it in its orbit, and so this kind of nexus of the Trump's relationship with Russia, but a lot of other people, and apparently Joe Biden's son saw economic opportunity when Ukraine had a more Western look. They've gone through some transitions in leadership in the Ukraine, and at some point, either Trump or someone in Trump's family or administration heard that Biden and Biden's son were involved here. And so they saw an opportunity for a political move, and they made it, and now it's come back to result in House movement against them. So I think it was probably just good luck that the president noticed this, and now it's perhaps turned into bad luck.
But it's against the law for the president to ask something that benefits him politically versus the country. Can you explain that constitutionally?
Well, constitutionally, the idea is, he will take care to faithfully execute the laws. I mean, his preference or his charge as president is to be in pursuing foreign policy to defend the country, to promote the best interests of the country, and to use it for something that's so obviously personal is considered to be a violation of the oath of office. So it's not as if there's a specific law written that says you can't do this. It's just considered a violation of the oath. So
what was he holding over Ukraine for the information?
Well, the idea was that we're a consistent contributor of foreign aid to the Ukraine, largely for military support. Military aid was something that we have to reappropriate every year or two, and we were about to send them a large amount of military aid, and the president delayed that, or instructed his chief of staff to delay that, in order to then have this conversation. And so we won't know till tomorrow with the transcript what actually went on in the conversation, but the suspicion is that there was some kind of ask for something that was not necessarily for the benefit of American foreign policy, but something that was personally beneficial to President Trump, and then the aid would get released. So that is the allegation, and House Democrats are now going to try to investigate that further.